Welcome, everybody. I'm Wes Warren. I'm here with Greg Stanley from Whitehall Management. And today we're going to talk about unlocking the hidden value in your practice, the hidden resale value of your practice. Greg, can you take a minute and just talk about how we got here?
We really worked on helping doctors save money, which actually was quite a laborious process. They had to do marketing, they had to increase their speed, they had to increase their space, they had to do all these things to make money, then pay taxes, try to live on it. And if something was left, well, we could save it and then talk about investing. What we've learned over the years is there's actually a faster, more powerful path to accumulation.
And that's what we're here to talk about, this term flipping practices from the real estate world, where you take a house that is in okay shape, maybe it's a little bit run down, and they really dress it up and they flip it and really kind of make a nice profit off of it. What we're going to teach you is how to do that with your own practice. The things you need to do to create an appealing practice that sells quickly and effectively, and that can bring you an extra $1 million in resale value or more. But every practice out there has the ability to grow to the point where there's an extra $1 million in equity value. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
There's actually people in real estate that most of you know about that stage houses. They come in and they know how to put various floor coverings, window coverings. They know how to make it almost photogenic for the ads. And that's the first house to sell. We're basically going to show you the same concept with the practice. It's more detailed, it's more in depth, and only a doctor would understand. It's not like real estate, but that's what we're going to do because, like I was saying, to save money through the old-fashioned way involves all this effort, investment, all these things you have to do to eke out a little money over what you're spending on your lifestyle so you can save it. We're going to show you how to get a big payday. Like
Yep.
you talked about, Wes, the extra million. In the past, we've had hundreds of AWOL clients. That's absent without leave. That's doctors who learned how to get income out of the practice through associates working in the office. We're in the seminar business for 40 years, and we were exposed to literally tens of thousands of doctors in every state in the United States. We've had coaching clients where we are inside their offices, inside their head, helping them move forward. And from all of this, we're going to show you how to create an incredibly valuable practice that is in the resale market and to do it very fast.
Whitehall has been known over the years to create practices of sizes, I would say, a lot of doctors don't even believe is real. And we've become really known for that. I would just like to comment that if you get everything working correctly, patients happy, where they refer, they stay. It's just literally about duplicating that and growing it and adding capacity. And it creates these gigantic $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year practices of general dentistry.
Some of the complaints we have from doctors who look at this is they say, well, they don't care about people. They're a mill. Well, some of them have 200 referrals a month or more. And the doctor making this claim that this is a mill, I'll ask them how many referrals they've got. It might be 8 or 10, you know? And so the question is, can you do high touch, personalized practices on a high level? Of course you can. Like you said, Wes, it plays out in the referral numbers.
Patient to patient referrals is key indicator of patient satisfaction. Another thing that we run into is, should I sell or should I stay? Greg, for years, we've been advocates, you shouldn't sell. Hold your practice as long as you can. And we still are advocates of that. But we realize the day does come where you have to sell it. So you might as well sell it for as much as you can. And that's really what this is about. Taking a minute to really understand what creates value in a practice, to make sure you're doing those things before that day comes. That might be 5 years down the road, it could be 10 years, it could be 2 years down the road, but we're still big advocates in keeping your practice.
One of the biggest mistakes doctors make is imagining, they're kind of feeling the stress. They're feeling tired. They are thinking that we're going to give them a strategy that basically runs them to death, with bigger practice, so you can sell it big and all of that. Not really. We're gonna design something really that's just for you with the days and hours you want to work, and we'll take care of the rest. We'll put the right people in there. We'll make it so this practice is both an income producer and an incredible equity producer.
For years, we've seen this 500,000, 600,000, 700,000, 800,000, which is pretty good. A lot of people would be very happy with that. Then we see practices sell for next to nothing, literally nothing, basically $50 a record. And then we also see this big jump where we see our practices selling for 5, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million. That's what we've seen. That's what this is about, is how to create a practice that is way more appealing. It creates an environment where, you're not selling it for peanuts, and it is selling for a multiple that is much greater than what you would normally get.
I think this is a good time to be talking about this because a lot of doctors learned in the COVID, they learned that what they thought retirement would be, sitting on the couch with the channel changer, really, it wasn't all that fulfilling. And even though they were older, kind of tired, a little bit worn down, they'd rather be in practice. They'd rather be working with people. And so if you've got any of that left in you, if you learned from the COVID shutdown that you've got another 1 or 2 laps around this track, we could show you how to make it really pay well, both in income and in equity. History talks about Napoleon and his downfall crossing the Rubicon. Some of you, that's a river, I guess, in Europe. Some of you think you might be too far gone. You've already crossed your Rubicon. Well, you really want to pull back and ask yourself, is that really true? Would I be willing to invest a little more? Would I be willing to spend a little time putting the right people in the right positions, maybe doing some marketing, tuning up my systems? If so, it's not too late for you.
So many doctors we work with really think like an earner, and that's what doctors are, that it's a profession and you are licensed to do a job. And because nobody else can do it without a license, it makes for a pretty good living. Most of our doctors do not think like business people. And I think that nobody would argue that. There are a few that do, but most people do think like an earner.
Wes, this is one of the things that surprised me decades ago when I got into dentistry, is that practices don't sell like businesses. A business will give an owner, kind of a decent income. He's in there flipping burgers or he's running a dry cleaners or whatever, but they'll sell that same business for $8 million. And in dentistry, we tend to take a pretty good income and then give it away, but you don't have to do that anymore.
That's right. So I want you to kind of put your business hat on and start thinking a little bit like a business owner and start thinking equity value. Equity value is where you create something like Greg is talking about right there, the dry cleaners. You create something that has a terminal event valuation where it is valuable to the point where it starts to click into the many millions. There's certain things you can do with your practice if you start thinking that way, thinking about the terminal event, the equity value of your practice. So if you start thinking about the equity value of your practice, you start making decisions differently. Like Greg was talking about, investing in marketing, investing in an extra operatory. If you know that the practice becomes infinitely more valuable by doing those things, you start to make decisions differently. And that's what we're talking about. We're going to give you the list of the things you need to do to create that extra value. And I'm not talking a little bit. I'm talking at least $1 million.
Well, it's just a comment. I think a lot of doctors finally decide that it's time to sell, not because they have so much money or think that it's great timing, it's because maybe 5 or 10 years ago, they lost the thread. The time came to change, to get digital, to get, a super website, to get better equipment. In other words, there came a time they were challenged to throw down and they didn't. And slowly things kind of unwound. And now you and I are talking like they're going to need to really ramp up. Well, based on what they know, that probably seems completely out of reach based on what they don't know. And there's so many things that have changed in dentistry and in dental marketing that if you knew them, you would be on fire to build up a practice that would sell for a lot or maybe even stay longer.
So this is how you make money fast, So if you were to save for 40 years, an extra $1 million, I don't know what that works out to be. Greg, you're the mathematician.
Let me give you a number, Wes. Forbes magazine did an article a number of years ago that said if you wanted to retire off your savings with the same amount of money you were making typically at the time of retirement, you would have had to start with your paper route and save 20% of what you earned over 41 years, which almost nobody has ever done.
Yeah, the math on this is you'd have to save $25,000 extra a year for those 40 years. That doesn't include inflation or interest. So if you take those things out, which kind of offset inflation and interest, you kind of end up with exactly what you started with. Yeah, it would be $25,000 a year you'd have to save for 41 years. And I can tell you, there's a couple maneuvers that you could make with your practice if you reinvested and put money into it, that within a year and a half, you'd have an extra $1 million.
Yes. And can I make one more comment on this particular concept? Everything in dentistry finally ends with a statement like, yeah, but how much are you keeping? Everybody likes to say that. Yeah, you're making good, but how much are you keeping? Well, for the most part, practice sales don't revolve around that. Yeah, that might be asked at some point, but the valuations are based on gross collections.
By and large, yeah. The thing that we see in the marketplace that's new is a new generation. There's a new generation coming on, and a lot of you are afraid of the environment over the next 5 or 10 years, the change in the transition market. As these buyers don't have the same drive and ambition that you had, it could impact the resale value of practices, and we're definitely seeing that, and we're going to see more of it. One thing that we are seeing, and we will see more of, is a big separation, the haves and have-nots, the truly desirable practices that are set up correctly. There'll be very few of those, and they'll literally bid the values of those practices up into the millions, and other practices will sell for next to nothing. So we are seeing that change, and we're seeing a separation of the haves and have-nots play out in this transition market. So you definitely want to position the practice well. And no, this is not about selling to DSOs and joining the circus, although that's definitely an option for our practices that get abnormally large. This is not about you selling to a DSO and having to work there for 3 or 5 years.
Doctors love to talk about what their practice is worth to a DSO. There's something reassuring about it. They quote numbers that really sound attractive.
Many of you have probably contacted DSOs and flirted with the idea of selling, cashing out your equity and giving it to them because they know what it's really worth. What I'm saying is you want to build that equity up and maximize it before you even have that conversation with them or anybody else. There's things you can do to really put a rocket on the value of your practice in a short amount of time. And it can be really short if you really want to invest in it. If you want to do it, invest money into growing your practice. If you want to do it organically, it'll take a couple years to build that value.
Some doctors will turn to a broker kind of like we do to DSOs, because they'll whisper in our ear that our practice is worth a really desirable number or an amount. And our assumption is they wouldn't say that if they couldn't somehow get the money. But the truth is they get the listing, and then if it doesn't sell right away, it just kind of goes cold. And so often practices that pay a broker a percentage, a commission, ended up selling the practice themselves, and the broker took money on it. So a broker isn't the worst thing can happen to you, but what you don't want is a broker telling you that your broke down, out of date, passed over practice that's falling apart is going to get you a bunch of money and you believe it. That's probably a bad relationship.
Absolutely.
We're going to show you how you're going to get real money for the practice with, and once you've got the real thing, you've got momentum. A broker is nice, and maybe you want to use one. Maybe you can negotiate down the commission a bit, but you're going to get it sold.
Yeah, it goes back to the haves and have-nots. You have a practice that is extremely desirable. You don't need a broker. You can negotiate down their commissions. But when you have a practice that is just kind of average, run-of-the-mill, yeah, you kind of need them, and it might sit there for a long time and not sell.
You want to look at the broker's track record. Is he just flipping practice after practice after practice? If so, that might work out. But so often their practice average been on the market, several years, tie you up in a long-term listing. So yeah, don't fall into this category of the have-nots because you just think you've gone too far. It's too late for you.
Yeah, and it's going to switch to this buyer's market, and it might already be in there. Is still great wealth in creating a practice that people really desire. If you let it go too far, they are unsaleable, and we're going to see more of those in the future. If you don't keep up to date and you don't do the things that we're going to recommend, yeah, you could be faced with an unsaleable practice.
I remember a couple of years ago, Wes and I went around to practices that were for sale here in Arizona. And they were in some incredibly desirable locations, super modern with 10 operatories, and they couldn't sell. They were trying to get people to take over the lease payments, and nobody would even do that.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what makes a practice valuable is got momentum. So thinking you're going to throw something together and get big money for it, it's just not going to happen.
Right. And so we got to literally take this and turn it into that in every facet of the practice, not just, obviously, it's not just about the equipment, but every part of the practice we have to upgrade and make it so desirable. And it is not just putting lipstick on a pig.
Real estate flippers, they know exactly how much to spend to put the practice at the top of the market. In my neighborhood, there's some flippers that have worked through my neighborhood, and you go into one, you can spot it. You don't, even though you might not think so, but it's the same people because the tile is actually the same. The cabinets are the same. They're flipping that thing because they know where the threshold of what you have to invest is.
Right. And so the ultimate goal is to create essentially a bidding war. You do get that extra $1 million, that your practice is so desired that you got many people wanting it.
We're looking for what we call force multipliers. You can see this guy here is wearing this special suit that you might have seen in the movie Aliens with Sigourney Weaver. This is a force multiplier. It's kind of a military term often used. Small things that can make a huge difference. If you're on the battlefield and somebody has a rifle, well, somebody else has a machine gun. That's a force multiplier. There's 12 force multipliers in practice building. We have time today to get to 6 of them, so let's get started.
A digital marketing, really getting savvy with the practice digitally so that it is first, that it is branded, everything works correctly, and they're driving vast amounts of new patients digitally.
So many doctors know so little about this. Yeah. They tend to believe the first person that comes along and says, oh, I can do this. I can get you all these new patients on this or that platform, I would say that has proven to be a heartache so
And,
many times.
and this is on the list because the younger generation, they really look at this stuff. The next thing is percentage of growth year over year. Even though the net doesn't increase, as long as the practice is increasing year over year, it is extremely important as far as its perceived value.
There's one line we can draw on that. Probably don't want it to be losing money.
Yeah, it can't be losing money, but let's say you made 300,000 last year, and this year you made 300,000 net take home, but the practice grew by 500,000. You just created equity value.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. So the percentage of growth year over year, the higher the percentage of growth, the more valuable it becomes. So if you're growing at 3 or 4%, that's kind of average. But if you're growing at 8, 9, 12%, 18%, it creates more value in your practice. And it's by and large has nothing to do with net. So divorce the two. Abnormally high new patient flow. This creates huge value. Take two practices, you lay them side by side, one's doing $1 million, the other one's doing $1 million. One sees 20 new patients, which is kind of average for that size practice, maybe 25. And the other one's seeing 70. Which one do you think is going to have more value, going to create this bidding war that I'm talking about? The one that has 70.
There's people that would buy your practice just for the new patient flow.
That's right. That's
Period.
right. That is a definite force multiplier. Hygiene. The amount of hygiene that the practice has. So many practices have just enough hygiene, or it's kind of thin on hygiene. In this environment where you're trying to create value, the amount of hygiene that the practice has proportionate to its overall gross is very important. And so there's definite value in having lots of patients in the practice. That one is a must.
Yeah, that shows that they have stayed with the practice. Thank you.
Yeah, it just creates the value. You've got two practices doing $1 million. One has 10,000 of hygiene, one has 20. The one with 20 is going to win every time. It's going to create that bidding war. It's the same concept. This one's huge. Associate doctor. A practice that has a successful associate doctor in the practice will create this right out of the chute. The more the production is reliant on one doctor, the owner, the less valuable it is. Take an office doing $2 million a year with no associate and the owner's doing all the work versus a practice doing $2 million a year with an associate in there doing about half the work. That practice is more valuable, believe it or not. So having a successful associate in the practice. And what's success? It depends on how many days they're working, but there's certainly levels of success here.
A lot of it also, Wes, I would add on the associate is, and this is what they're going to be thinking as they're shopping you as a practice, the likelihood of this revenue stream continuing through the associate, meaning after the sale, is this going to continue? And in other words, has the associate built relationships? Has the staff got relationships with patients? So if the revenue is likely to continue, you've really got a force multiplier there.
That's right. That's why it's more valuable to have an associate in there. The next thing is revenue and its growth and trajectory. This obviously creates value. And like we're trying to point out here, practice that has an associate in it producing an extra 600,000 or 700,000, although you don't get much of it in terms of net, you really don't. 15%, it's not that much, but it does create terminal value. It does create this effect that you can count on that income. The practice, a new buyer can count on that income. And that's what creates the value. Okay, so revenue is king here. And so you've got to create a practice that has more money flowing through it, and it doesn't have to actually produce that much more net. And this is where I want you to think like a business person. If I said that we could grow your practice by $1 million a year, you got to invest 100,000 in marketing and some staff to grow it. And maybe it works double shift. It's not even operating when you're there, but it's basically like a startup. And you got it to $1 million, and it cost you 100,000 to do that. But it created 800,000 in a terminal event. Would you do it? Yeah, of course you would.
Especially if you're going to sell in the foreseeable future.
That's right, right. And so this is what we're talking about, is creating a practice that has terminal value, not just an income machine. That's what this is all about.
Can I just comment on that? Some people might say, well, how are they different? How are they really different? Let me give you an example. An income machine might be a doctor and his or her spouse with one or two staff, and they're doing big cases, and they're keeping so much of what they make, but there's no value. There's no resale value in that almost at all.
That practice you just described has absolutely no resale value. It's the most difficult practice to sell.
You might sell it, but you might get it back too.
Yeah, yeah. So each practice has its own unique strategy on how to do this. We can't tell you exactly what you need to do to create this terminal value until we really see the practice. And we could really tell you the things you need to change, adapt, invest in to create this effect. Time is obviously on your side. The more time you have, the more you have time to fix these things and create this effect. If you're looking to sell in the next 6 months or a year, time's working against you. It's probably not right for you.
You're going to get what you're going to get.
In many ways, it's like a practice startup. It's like starting a new practice inside your practice and investing in things that might not necessarily give you a return. Like I pointed out, you've got two practices, one doing $1 million, another doing $1 million, one with 20 new patients, one with 70. Well, if I told you that they're netting the same, but one is just reinvesting 3,000 into marketing, so it's netting 3,000 less, but he's going to have a resale value much higher than yours.
This is one of the things we've kind of preached over the years. If you invest something in your practice that will break even from the get-go, you're on the right track. So many doctors hold back because they can't figure out where their percentage is. What's in this for me? I mean, I'm going to throw down this money. I want to see it double tonight. And it just doesn't work that way. If it breaks even, especially marketing, that's a good start.
Yeah, and this is not for you if you're looking to sell right away. I mean, that's obviously clear. This is something that does take a little time to put into place. I would say a minimum of a year to get things going and to create the trajectory that a future buyer is going to want to look at. They typically want to see a couple years of numbers that look impressive. Let's put it that way. There's something that you got to kind of plan for before you want to transition.
Some doctors are going to ask too, Wes. They're going to say, can I sell it for this big money and stick around and make an income? In some cases, we can talk about that, but we kind of want you thinking about being ready for a terminal event so we can maximize it.
Right. And obviously, if you don't want to reinvest, this really is something that most people don't want to do and don't see the value in it. And what we're trying to say is there's huge value in creating more revenue appeal to your practice in terms of a transition. And we're talking millions. So if you're not willing to risk in a marketing venture, spending an extra $3-4 grand in marketing, things like that don't appeal to you, it's not going to work.
Wes, a comment. Some people feel like I just got the football over the first down line. I just made it to where I could quit, and walk away. If you're going to cut it that thin, you can't reinvest. You're thinking different than we're thinking. We're thinking of throwing down and going for it.
If you're thinking like this, milk every little penny out of the practice, have your wife work at the front desk and not pay her, and and she does the work of three people, and you're doing gigantic cases, and that's what your business model is. Yeah, this is not the right strategy for you.
Not a bad profile to save money, but not what we're
Yeah,
talking
right.
about.
There's nothing wrong with it. The next thing is to ride it into the ground.
Can I tell you about a case? This was in the Northeast. I walked into a practice. The staff person at the front invited me back. When I came through, I closed the door behind me, and an entire wall of the baseboard along the floor fell off on the ground when I closed the door. And it looked like it had been painted over, painted over, painted over. In other words, this practice was the picture of neglect. This was a case of riding it into the ground.
Right.
I knew it when I saw the baseboards fall.
Don't want to enter the modern age, don't want to really just don't want to reinvest at all. And you believe that the money you've saved and your Social Security are going to carry you home till the end, that inflation won't happen and won't erode the dollar, and that in the end, the government will be there for you when you need them. If you believe all that, this is not for you. But I will say, if you are interested in maximizing the full value of your practice and you want to talk to us, that's what we do. We can analyze your practice, tell you what kind of it's probably worth now, and give you an assessment of the changes you'd have to make to create a practice that does sell for an extra $1 million. That's what we're offering. It is an assessment of potential future value. The things that you can do, and it's customized to your practice, things that you should do to create future value.
You might want our help in implementing some of this. You might not. That's up to you.
Yeah, it's not about that. We're going to show you where that extra $1 million is, period. After our Zoom session with you, at the end of it, you'll know how to create an extra $1 million in terminal value in a sale. We normally offer this for $97, but for those of you listening and want to sign up today, we'll do it at no charge. But you do have to sign up today. There'll be a link here for you to get on our schedule, and we're going to plan 45 minutes so that we can talk about your practice, talk about how to create that extra $1 million.
You know, Wes, the last time we offered something along this consulting line of talking about practice evaluations and so forth, we booked out 3 months in advance, 40 hours a week. So get on the phone. It tends to be a popular topic.
Yeah.
Get on the phone and let us show you where you want to go.
Yeah, and we were charging $97 for each one of those. And we were booked out for months. And it wasn't even Greg and myself doing it. We had somebody else in
An
the
employee
office.
here, yeah.
Yeah, doing it. This will be done by Greg and myself. But for the no charge, we're going to only accept 20 doctors. So get on, sign up right away.
And don't miss your appointment. Get there and let's get this done.